Ahoy there, Captain Benzie here, coming at you with another video for EVE Echoes, and the first in a mini-series of preparing for Tech Level 10. Now, for some of us, Tech Level 10 is now literally 2 weeks away. That's thanks to all of the extra stuff that we're getting from the Concord Pass, plus obviously Combo Omega, etc. that we've had running since the very beginning. I'm well aware, though, that not everyone is hitting Tech Level 10. I know some of you it's a little bit of a way off, but hey, I thought it would be interesting to talk about the different ships at Tech Level 10, what they mean, and which ones I think are going to be most popular and why. Now, this was partially suggested by Marco Darkstar of Mine Corporation. He has been contacting me a little bit recently, and he was like, oh, I'm really keen to see a battleship version of this. I was intending to do all of these anyway, but for you, Marco, I am starting with the battleships. We'll then have a look at medium ships in a future video, and then smalls and industrials in separate videos after that. So it's a 3 to 4 parter series, depending if I can cram the industrials into other ones. Today, though, as I said, we will be starting off with the battleships. We're a couple of weeks off Tech 10, but I'm hoping there might be a change to one particular battleship, which we'll talk about in a moment. If you do enjoy this type of video, let me know by hitting a like on it. Let me know in the comment section down below. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel to make the rest of this series as well, especially if you're keen to see the mediums or the smalls. Without further ado, though, let's jump straight into talking about the Tech Level 10 battleships. If you've watched any of my other videos where we're preparing for a new tech level and I'm talking about all the cool new ships we're going to get, you'll know I tend to like to start with the Amarr Empire, then work my way counterclockwise around the 4 main empires to finish on the best for last, the Minmatar Republic. This time around, though, I'm saving the Minmatar Republic for last because there's some interesting things I think to say there, and some stuff I think needs fixing. Now here we have the Amarr Empire. Let's start off with these. At Tech Level 9 we had the Apocalypse and we had the Armageddon. Now I predicted that the Armageddon would be a very popular ship, and lo and behold it definitely was. It's a PvP beast. It is a poor man's Balgorn with drone support as well, which makes it terrifying. But what happens when we hit Tech Level 10? Well, first of all, we get the Armageddon 2, which 100% is going to be a very popular ship. In fact, if we add its comparisons against the standard Armageddon, you should see why straight out of the gate. Looking at the stats on the top there, the fitting profile is exactly the same for both of them. The Energy Nosferatu and Energy Neutralizer skills are exactly the same. As we come further down, though, you'll see that we go from 40% drone DPS up to 50% drone DPS. The Armageddon 2 is just a flat-up increase on damage. It's not overly exciting in that regards, but it is a big increase there. EHP and command range remain the same for drones. We get a couple of other little differences as well, like for example our defense has increased, of course, flight velocity is slightly faster, we've got a bigger power grid, larger capacitor bank, the larger cargo hold even, and a smaller source radius. Not that that is going to make any difference at all if you anything can scan the Armageddon and the Armageddon 2. Doesn't matter that the source radius is slightly smaller for the Armageddon 2, you're not going to avoid scanning with that slightly reduced source radius. Now, the Armageddon 2 itself, this is a really cool ship. As I said, the fact that it is a drone ship, I think is going to make it popular anyway, plus the fact that it gets some really cool sort of skins and nanocores to it. This is going to be one beast of a ship, and if you're a battleship industrialist, I would start preparing for Armageddon 2s to be one of the things people are going to be wanting. We then get the Abaddon. At long last, we get the Abaddon added to our list. We, of course, have already had the Apocalypse, which is a laser battleship. Here with the Abaddon, though, this is a laser battleship with a difference. This one seems to be more optimized around things like brawling. This is going to be a pulse laser fit, I think, for the most part. You're getting an increase to laser damage and an increase to the optimal range, which is what makes pulse lasers tick. You need that long optimal range there, so that you can be within that. 4% armor resistance as well per level of advanced battleship command is really going to help you out and help keep you tanky and alive. It's got some severe tank to it as well, this thing. 6 low slots, 8 high slots, 4 mid slots is a decent amount there. We've got a lot of defense, 105,337, the vast majority in the armor there, 33,395. This is an absolute tank of a battleship, and it is going to do very well brawling with pulse lasers, I think. Again, let me know your opinions if you think I'm wrong on any of these. I need to take this one off the comparisons here because I needed to add on to the Apocalypse to see the Apocalypse Striker by comparison. Now, the difference between a standard Apocalypse and the Apocalypse Striker starts, of course, with the mid-slots. We get an additional mid-slot on the Striker. You'll see that the stats here include a just flat-out increase to most stats. We're getting an increase to large laser damage. which wasn't on the Apocalypse. The larger laser optimal range of 7.5% is still there. You get a slight loss to tracking speed compared to the Apocalypse, but in fairness, that's not going to be a huge deal when you understand what the Apocalypse Striker is capable of, and we'll come to that in just a second. Otherwise, the rest of the stats are flat-up upgrades as well. Extra defense, faster flight velocity, bigger cargo hold, bigger power grid and capacitors, and a smaller source radius. Where the Apocalypse Striker really shines, however, is in its Striker mode. You can activate Striker mode, and this basically turns the Apocalypse Striker from a battleship into a dreadnought. It brings you to a screeching halt, it doubles your damage output, but it halves your tracking capabilities. Now, if I've played around with this quite a bit, Nina actually suggested some cool fits for this way back when. With Striker mode, you can sit at a long range of like 60 to 80 kilometers away with pulse lasers. Switch those on with Striker mode, and you can snipe people with pulse lasers from an absolutely monstrous distance. You will one-shot most ships smaller than a battlecruiser. In fact, some battlecruisers will go down in one hit, especially more Caldari ones. It is an absolute beast of a ship, and I do reckon this is going to be very popular, especially with PvP fleets, if you're going to be going against other people's citadels. That Striker mode, the Siege mode as it's called, is very much designed for taking out outposts and corporation citadels. It is, you're not going to be using it on standard PvE against other ships unless you're using it to make it basically a sniper. Think of it kind of like Sniper mode, but with just a couple of subtle differences. It is a flat damage increase, whereas Sniper mode was an alpha increase, but a DPS decrease. It's kind of Sniper mode, but better. Just, it's mainly designed for taking out citadels. It's also the reason why I'm confused as to why dreadnoughts are even being considered at this point. Now, ultimately, for the Amarr battleships, I do think that the Armageddon 2 is, of course, going to be the most popular due to just, well, the power of drones. People love drones, and the Armageddon is a great ship for that. It is terrifying in PvP, both solo and in a fleet. It does really well in PvE, quite comfortably clearing Tech 10 storylines, etc. Quite frankly, if you have an Armageddon 2, you can do low-sec encounters and not worry too much about 1 or 2 or 3 people jumping in. You can probably handle them. It's only a fleet that is going to cause you a problem. The Striker, you can argue that yes, it's going to be very useful for PvE because you can snipe at distances, but if anything happens to come in close, you're not going to have much time to sort of switch everything off, warp away, and hope you make it to safety. It's one of those things I would pre-align and sort of be drifting in that direction with your with the Siege mode active, and then jump from there, but definitely a PvP one. I think the Abaddon's going to be a lot of fun as well. I'm not going to naysay it as a bad battleship, I just really think the Armageddon is going to be by far the most popular of the Amarr battleships. But what about the Caldari State? Because they have one of the most popular Tech 9 battleships currently as well, the Raven. So we're going to add this one onto comparisons here, and we're going to compare it against the Tech 10 Raven Striker. Now, if you look at the standard paper stats here, you'll see the Raven, we get an increase of large missile torpedo damage, goes from 5% per level up to 6% per level. You'll also notice that is now on advanced large missile and torpedo operation rather than just large missile torpedo operation, so you do need to be training into the advanced levels to get those bonuses now. It's the same large missile torpedo activation time reduction, the same large missile torpedo velocity increase, which of course gives you extra range, and same flight velocity for battleship command, although again, it has now moved to advanced battleship command. So basically, I would stick with the Raven until you have advanced battleship command and advanced large missile operation up to 5 each. Otherwise, the Raven's going to kind of do you better for the time being. It's one of those, wait until you've got the skills, then upgrade into it. And even when you do upgrade, the only real difference so far is in regards to that torpedo damage going from 25% to 30% increase, which it's a notable increase for sure, but whether or not it's going to be worth the cost to upgrade into is kind of up to you. Same when you look at the rest of the stats here. Whilst the overall defense has gone up quite dramatically, we've got a larger power grid, a larger capacitor bank, even a larger cargo hold, and a smaller source radius for all it matters, we are actually moving slower with the Raven Striker. Its flight velocity drops from 112 down to 102. Now, of course, it does also get Siege mode, that one which is kind of like an upgraded sniper mode. You are going to basically park your ship in space once it's activated. It reduces your flight velocity by like 80 or 90%, something crazy. It then increases your DPS dramatically whilst reducing your application. Now, for turret ships, where obviously your actual, the angular velocity matters whether or not you hit, therefore something that isn't moving or is rushing straight towards you is just going to get sniped no matter how bad your tracking is. When it comes to missiles, the fact that siege mode increases the explosion radius and decreases the explosion velocity dramatically means even a stationary ship does not take full damage from those missiles. It means that siege mode for the striker is not kind of a sniper mode. It is very much a useful against citadels, useful against corporation outposts, that kind of thing. It's only really going to be used against other structures in space with siege mode on the Raven Striker. What that basically means is, whereas the Apocalypse Striker, for example, is a rather large upgrade over the standard Apocalypse, the Raven Striker, for most people, is not that big an upgrade over the Raven. It's a few minor like DPS increases and overall defenses, but if you're finding that the Raven does everything you want it to, I don't see much need to upgrade to the Raven Striker, unless you are intending to be taking down citadels and other things like that. Basically, stick to the Raven if it's just for like basic PvP and for PvE. No point to upgrade. What then about the Scorpion 2? The Scorpion is a bit of a weird ship. I don't see many people flying these. In fact, for a long period, there weren't even any on the market, which is a shame, because this is a really cool ship. It's primarily an electronic warfare platform, perhaps, which for a battleship is fairly unique in and of itself. None of the other battleships really get bonuses to electronic warfare, but the Scorpion, it also gets a very interesting skill, which we'll talk about in a moment. Now, the fitting profile between the Scorpion and the Scorpion 2 changes in as much as you get an extra mid-slot, which makes sense for an electronic warfare platform. We get Guidance Disruption, Strength, Guidance Disruption Optional Range, and we get a bonus here to Scan Resolution as well, which is going to help the Scorpion 2 lock on that little bit faster. The fun with the Scorpion comes in the skills here, which on the Scorpion was Battleship Command and 15% increase. Here on the Scorpion 2, it's Advanced Battleship Command with a 20% increase both to turret damage and missile torpedo damage. This doesn't specify what type of turrets. That is lasers, decomposers, railguns, and cannons, and you get missiles on there as well. So whatever weapon system you're skilled into, the Scorpion can use that remarkably well. Which means if you want to put large autocannons on this, you're going to get a massive boost to that, while still being able to use the Guidance Disruption and having the massive overall defense and shields that the Scorpion 2 affords. It is fairly slow. Oh, it's a battleship. Of course it's slow. It's slightly faster than the Scorpion. It's got a decent power grid, decent capacitor. Cargo hold is a slight increase, and again, the source radius reduction is there. I think the Scorpion 2, it's not going to be a popular ship by any stretch, which is a shame, because they're a lot of fun. We saw the Celestis started off really unpopular until people twigged that, hang on, the Celestis gets bonuses to strike cannons or autocannons or railguns. It gets bonuses to all of these, and suddenly it became a terrifying threat. Looks like absolute butt cheeks, but is a terrifying threat. The Scorpion actually gets the advantage that not only is it a surprisingly powerful ship, it looks badass as all hell. Look at it. It's a literal flying space Scorpion. And if you put the Guristas Veteran on it, it actually looks a little bit like a poor man's Rattlesnake, just without the drones and with ridiculous cannon fire instead. So if you fancy something a little bit different, I think the Scorpion 2 is going to be an interesting one. Now, then we come to the Rock. The Rock is one of these ships that I know a lot of people have been waiting for, since this was originally a Tech 9 ship and got moved up to Tech 10. This is, of course, a very powerful railgun ship, and it has some really cool skins and abilities to it anyway. But let's have a look at the actual abilities. Now, the Rock itself, as I said, is a large railgun platform. So if you've been using things like the Talos or the Naga, this makes a direct upgrade into battleships possible now. Hopefully you've already got Advanced Large Railgun from flying those, and then you just change your Battlecruiser for Advanced Battleship Command, which admittedly is a lot of skill points, but hey, there's a good reason it's a lot of skill points. What you're getting out of this is a 9% increase to large railgun damage, and a 12.5% increase to large railgun optimal range. That is an insane amount of extra range onto already a very long-ranged weapon, especially if you're going with something like the rifled railguns. A Rock as a sniper at the back of a fleet is a terrifying prospect, and I'm looking forward to trying one of these in PvE as well. I don't think this is going to have any issues at all. Warping in at 100, quickly rushing away as far as it can away from the main spawn point, and then just sniping from extreme ranges with large rifled railguns. For things like for brawling with large snub-nosed, that could be a bit more interesting. I think certainly that increase to shield resistance at the bottom there is going to help. The large railgun optimal range means you're going to be able to start firing with those snub-nosed railguns fairly early on, you know, while things are still at a good range away from you. And we've got a good sort of profile here that we can fit a couple of Weber fires and a scrambler on there in our mid slots to help deal with some of those smaller targets as well. Plus, of course, we've got 2 drones. I think there's a lot of potential here in the ROC. I know it's a ship that a lot of people have been waiting for, so 100% I think this is going to be a very popular option, especially for anyone who's been like messing around with either the Talos or the Naga. It kind of upgrades directly from both of those, and quite frankly, who doesn't want a ship that gets a really cool Gurustus skin like that as well? But that rounds out the Caldari. Speaking of railguns, then, let's move on to the Gallente Federation. Now, this has, by hands down, the most popular battleship in the game currently, with the Dominix, and of course, at tech level 10, we get the Dominix 2, so I think this is going to be one that's worth talking about right out of the gate. Now, the fitting profile for both of these is, of course, exactly the same, and we've got a straight-up increase here, 40% drone DPS, up to 45% drone DPS on the Dominix 2. Otherwise, you're still getting that same optimal range and same drone tracking speed and same drone control range there of 10km boosts. There's a 50km boost there at full advanced battleship command. This means that the Dominix 2 is just going to cement its position as the best drone sniper in the game, and hands down one of the best battleships that Eve Echoes has to offer. The versatility that drones offer, the fact that you can sit at extreme range and snipe with your sentry drones, if something gets close you can switch down to small or medium drones that still get that absolutely massive drone DPS increase there, 45% per level. When you work that out across the full thing, that's literally 220% additional drone DPS. That is huge. That's right up there with the Rattlesnake, for crying out loud. But, on top of that, you're also getting a large increase to its overall defense, slight increase to flight velocity, larger power grid, a larger capacitor bank, larger cargo hold, and a smaller source radius. Again, not that that source radius is going to save you at all. All of this together means, of course, that the Dominix 2 is going to be everyone's space potato of choice. There's just going to be no two ways about it. This is by far the best battleship that you will find in Eve Echoes, and it actually looks really cool as well, with those sort of banners hanging off the side of it. I like it. It's a ship that knows it's king of the battleships, and it's going to be the one that everyone is going to want to go to. If you want to be able to solo Tech 10 storylines, the Dominix is your best option. Nothing short of a fleet is going to put a hole in your sail. Now, of course, at tech level 9 as well, we did have the Megathron, and we now get the Megathron Striker. So let's look at these side by side, because these are, it's naturally going to be like the others, pretty much a direct upgrade. We're getting an additional mid-slot, which gives you a little bit more electronic warfare. If you were struggling to fit everything you wanted to, things like, you know, Nosferatus, Scramblers, Weber fires, that kind of thing, you can now fit those in the mid-slots a little bit easier. We still got the 5% reduction to large railgun activation time and the 5% increase to large railgun tracking speed, but now we're getting an additional 4% large railgun damage. Again, this means that the Megathron makes an excellent snub-nosed railgun brawler, but with the rifled railguns, it is doing an extraordinary amount of damage there. Thanks to the activation time decrease, those are going to be firing faster, and the railgun damage means that every shot now coming quicker is going to be dealing more damage as well. The good tracking speed, though, does really help with those snubs, especially if you've got a couple of Weber fires on the targets you're going to be after. Still a reduction to inertia modifier, but it's a battleship. It's still cumbersome. It's just slightly better if you have advanced battleship command trained up. Overall defense has had a humongous increase there, going from 66,917 up to 105,000. It's like a 40,000 HP increase across the board there. It's notably faster, 121 up from 110, better power grid, better capacitors, much larger cargo hold capacity, and curiously a tiny reduction to source radius. The main thing about the Megathron Striker is going to be, again, the fact that it has Siege Mode. And Siege Mode increases the range of your turrets, increases the damage, stops you dead in your tracks, but massively increases the damage whilst also worsening the application. But if a target is, you know, not moving or has very low angular velocity in comparison to you, it doesn't matter that your tracking is terrible. Those large railguns are going to do an obscene amount of damage and be able to snipe things from massive ranges. And snub-nosed railguns, honestly, snub-nosed railguns on a Megathron Striker in siege mode is just terrifying. You get a decent amount of range, and as long as they're not moving at a high angular velocity at said range, you're going to be able to one-shot most ships. Like, I would probably do a video just on the Megaton Striker because of how insanely cool that is as a concept. I know the Megatron is a particularly popular hull in how it looks. I know not a lot of people seem to be flying them in EVE Echoes. I think the Megatron Striker is a bit of a curveball one. I think a lot of people might realise that they've been sleeping on this one, and that's going to be an excellent hull for them to actually fly and have a lot of fun in. Like, seriously, I think that's going to be a very powerful ship. Then, of course, we have the Hyperion. No, we're not moving to Borderlands here. This is the final of the Gallente Tech 10 battleships, and this is by far a railgun ship. Again, this is definitely more for sort of the sniping side of things, using large rifled railguns. You get a massive 9% increase to large railgun damage, and a 7.5% increase to large railgun accuracy fall-off, which gives you a lot of extra range to work with when you're looking at large rifled railguns, and an obscene amount of damage on that. Now, the fact that it's a 7.5% increase to armor repair efficiency is also really nice. It helps you stay alive a lot better, and kind of normally that would urge me towards brawling. However, with no bonuses to large turret tracking, I would continue to keep this one at range. It just means that if someone happens to get under your guns and you're struggling to hit them, at least you can stay alive whilst help is on the way. It's got a massive amount of tank, pretty good stats across the board for a battleship elsewhere, and let's be fair, it just looks amazing. It's certainly one of the more unusual looking battleships in EVE Echoes, but then that being said, it's a Gallente ship. Of course it looks unusual. They all look unusual. What then for the poor Minmatar Republic? Because these guys got a lot of messing around between the last patches. When we saw before, we had the Maelstrom, and then at tech level 10 was the Maelstrom Striker. Then the Maelstrom got taken from tech level 10, tech level 9 up to tech level 10, and suddenly we had the Tempest come from tech level 10 down to tech level 9. Then we lost this Maelstrom Striker completely, leaving us just with the Striker, and then the Tempest 2 and all of this kind of thing. It got confusing, and it looked for a while like the Minmatar Republic was not going to be getting a striker vessel at all. So if you were listening to like how the Apocalypse Striker and the Megaton Striker make awesome sniping platforms, and again the Raven Striker being an excellent option to deal with like outposts and citadels and things like that, well, you may have been a bit worried about the Minmatar. It looks, however, that we are getting the Tempest Striker here. Now, if we have a look at the Tempest Striker, and we compare this, of course, to the Tech Level 9 Tempest, have a look at these two side by side, you'll see that, again, there is very little change there in the fitting profile at all. They remain the same. We get the same large cannon damage, but now we get a reduction to large cannon activation time. That was 4% on the Tempest, it's now 5% on the Tempest Striker. And there is an increase to tracking speed as well. We then get a signature radius reduction as our secondary skill. And this kind of came out the field for me because I was under the impression that the Maelstrom Striker had been removed, and then it was just the Tempest 2. But here we are, I'm looking at a Tempest Striker, so I'm not entirely sure when this changed. Anyway, we get a massive increase to the overall defense here of the Tempest Striker. The flight velocity is actually slower than the standard Tempest, which again strikes me as weird, but it's not, you know, it's the same with the Raven there, I guess. A massive increase to the power grid output. The capacitors get a slight increase. Cargo hold capacity is increased as well, followed by the source radius reducing by a whopping 2 meters. Basically, what we're looking at here is, of course, a direct upgrade from the Tempest. The Tempest Striker is a direct upgrade over the Tempest. I would consider, actually, it is a significant upgrade, thanks to, basically, that large cannon tracking speed. That 25% additional large cannon tracking speed means that the Tempest Striker now works surprisingly well as a large autocannon brawler. The Tempest itself may have struggled with that, just in case anything gets close. The large cannons are, terrible tracking. But when we look at it now, I think the Tempest Striker is going to work well as a brawling platform. I think it's going to work excellently as a sniper platform. Imagine 7 large strike cannons with siege mode on. The amount of extra range you're getting from that, the damage that you can put out from an frankly obscene distance. I think the Tempest Striker is going to be one of the best battleships out there, right up there with the Dominix 2 and with the Armageddon 2. That's my personal opinion. I'm sure a lot of you are going to tell me I'm wrong in the comment section down below, but to me, it's an awesome looking ship, and it now has the stats to actually back it up. So where does this leave the actual Maelstrom? Because the Maelstrom itself now has had some significant changes as well. We get the additional 8th high slot, sure, which adds a lot of extra DPS. We then get that 5% large cannon damage, and a reduction to large cannon activation time. This suggests towards the large autocannons, but again, with no tracking bonus, I don't know how that's going to do, and there's no range, no tracking, so it does kind of suffer with that just a little bit. But then it gets that massive increase to shield booster amount. This, therefore, appears to be a brawling ship. 100% I would fit the Maelstrom as kind of a poor man's Macariel. It's a brawler. It's got that shield boost amount. It's going to have insane large cannon damage. The DPS coming off this with 8 large autocannons and 25% increased large cannon damage, with a 25% reduction to their activation time, means basically you are getting a Gatling battleship. As I said, a poor man's Macariel. I'm just worried at the lack of tracking on that one, and so I think we'll see. I think it's going to be one that a lot of people want to fly. I know a lot of people have been keen to fly these, and were disappointed when they moved up to tech level 10. I just hope it's worth the wait, and I'm worried that that tracking might pose an issue. But of course, with nanocores being a thing these days, if you can roll a nanocore that gets tracking bonuses, then perhaps that fixes that. Finally then, we have the Typhoon 2. Now the Typhoon is a little bit maligned when it comes to the Typhoon compared to Raven. A lot of people tell you that you're an idiot for flying the Typhoon over the Raven, and on paper, I would argue that yeah, the Raven is arguably the better of the two. I don't think that the Typhoon's completely out of the game, though. I think it's still an interesting battleship. I've seen a lot of people flying those around and enjoying the Typhoon and doing really, really well with it. I think the reduction to the activation time there certainly really helps things. The explosion velocity, though, clearly implies that this is designed for PvE and possibly even torpedo usage. That's then backed up here with a quick scan resolution allowing you to lock onto a new wave when it arrives. I don't know. I've always thought that the Raven works better at sort of a range, whereas the Typhoon is going to do considerably better when it is using torpedoes, or even perhaps things just like the using rapids to take out smaller targets. I like the Typhoon. I really like how it looks. I like the stats here. I don't think it's necessarily that the Typhoon is as good as the Raven, but I think the Typhoon 2 more than makes up for that. That explosion velocity reduction there is absolutely huge. Plus having the 8 high slots there makes for a terrifying amount of firepower. Its defense is a little bit low compared to some of the other battleships out there, but again, it's a Minmatar ship, it's kind of expected. It's surprisingly fast though, 151 meters per second, or fast for a battleship, should we say. It's got a good power grid, good capacitor bank, very nice cargo hold capacity, and the source radius is one of the smallest out there as well at 391, though it's not really going to change much, you're still going to be scanned down by everything. I think that the Typhoon has been one of those sort of sleeper ships, and again, I think the Typhoon 2 is going to do really well. I just don't think it's going to necessarily be as popular as, for example, the Raven Striker will be. I think if most people are looking for a missile battleship at tech level 10, it's going to be the Raven Striker they go for. I think the Typhoon 2 is honestly the better of the two options. That's just a gut feeling from looking at the stats. Remember, I am not a battleship pilot. These are just my thoughts and abilities looking at the stats. So where does that leave us in regards to all 4 empires combined and the full brace of battleships that we're going to be getting? Well, 100% the Dominix 2 is going to be right there at the top of proceedings. Everyone is going to want a Dominix 2. If you are going to be building and selling those, you're probably going to do pretty well for a good stretch of time. Same with the Armageddon 2, another very popular ship that I think will do very, very well. I think the Raven Striker will start off popular, but then people will move to the Typhoon 2 in the future. I think the Rock is going to be the railgun one of choice, possibly the Megaton Striker close behind, and I think the Tempest Striker is probably going to be my personal favourite, and the one that if I ever went into battleship skills would be the one I fly, just for the insane amount of range and damage and that it's going to get there in Striker mode. But again, the Hyperion and the Megatron with rifled railguns, they're going to outrange it, but I don't know. Those are just my thoughts and opinions. They're just my thoughts and opinions. Please do let me know yours in the comment section down below. I know a lot of you guys fly battleships a lot more frequently than I do. I know there's that joke that I spend my entire life on Fulmination. In fairness, I really don't. I actually logged in today to do this video and had to upgrade the account to have a Mega so that I could actually fly the battleship for this bit here. It's been that long since I was on it, other than just to jump into the Heron Explorer the other day to do that. So I don't fly battleships all that much, and I would therefore love to hear your thoughts and opinions on which you think is going to be the best of these once Tech 10 hits. Which are you most excited for? Which are you looking forward to building most? Which do you think most people are going to want? And which do you think works out best overall? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. Otherwise, folks, thanks for watching, and happy sailing, and see you in New Eden.